Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, akuntan profesional unggul Indonesia maju. Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, IAI, telah berkiprah mendukung pembangunan SDM dan transformasi ekonomi Indonesia.
Akuntan memiliki peran penting dalam pembangunan nasional yang berkesinambungan.
Profesi akuntan mendukung upaya peningkatan profesionalisme SDM Indonesia agar bisa optimal berkarya mendukung pembangunan ekonomi yang efisien dan transparan. Melalui Prakarsa 6.1 yang telah ditetapkan sebagai program umum Dewan Pengurus Nasional IAI periode 2018-2022, IAI siap berkarya mengawal perekonomian bangsa ini menuju Indonesia Emas 2045.
Saya sangat mendukung rencana IAI untuk mempercepat program sertifikasi agar para akuntan di negara kita memiliki kreativitas, inovasi, keterampilan, dan memiliki daya saing, dan sekali lagi dalam rangka mendukung pengembangan ekosistem kita yang lebih akuntabel, lebih efisien, goal-oriented, dan inovatif.
Tanggung jawab itu terwujud melalui Chartered Accountant Indonesia sebagai identitas akuntan profesional Indonesia dan telah mendapat pengakuan kualitas secara global. Prakarsa 6.1 berisi 6 langkah aksi dengan satu tujuan strategis untuk memperkuat peran IAI dalam meningkatkan kepercayaan masyarakat terhadap entitas bisnis dan publik dengan menyiapkan akuntan profesional berintegritas siap menghadapi masa depan. IAI melaksanakan tugas dan tanggung jawabnya menyusun standar akuntansi keuangan dan standar profesi, melaksanakan ujian sertifikasi, serta aktivitas keprofesian lain mengacu kepada International Federation of Accountants dan Chartered Accountant Worldwide. IAI for Society dijalankan untuk memberikan manfaat yang semakin besar bagi masyarakat serta untuk mendekatkan profesi kepada publik. Founding Fathers IAI telah menetapkan 2 tujuan pendirian IAI. IAI dibangun untuk mempertinggi mutu pendidikan akuntan dan meningkatkan kualitas pekerjaan akuntan Indonesia. IAI menguasai perubahan, menyiapkan masa depan.
Gabung Brevet Pajak IAI, pilihan tepat untuk Anda. Pelatihan Brevet IAI, ahli pajak, bedah substansi, temukan solusi. Kenapa memilih IAI? Modul yang selalu update dan materi yang dilengkapi dengan pembahasan studi kasus komprehensif. Instruktur yang terjaga kompetensinya, berpengalaman, dan tentu saja profesional. Apa aja yang didapat kalau belajar pajak? Sudah pasti, kita jadi tahu seluk-beluk perhitungan pajak. Menjadi kuasa hukum perpajakan mewakili perusahaan, meningkatkan karir dan menunjang profesi. Kalau ingin menjadi konsultan pajak, belajar brevet pajak juga bisa sebagai langkah persiapan USKP. So, banyak kan manfaat belajar brevet pajak? Sebagai benefit tambahan, IAI melaksanakan program kuliah umum perpajakan dengan menghadirkan narasumber dari praktisi dan profesional di bidang perpajakan. IAI juga melaksanakan gathering alumni brevet untuk senantiasa mengupdate informasi perpajakan. Kalian juga tidak perlu bingung, karena IAI menyiapkan berbagai pilihan waktu belajar, jadi dapat disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan. Bagi teman-teman mahasiswa, IAI juga memberikan harga khusus mahasiswa aktif. Selama pandemi, IAI juga tetap hadir dalam pelatihan brevet pajak secara virtual dengan menggunakan platform Microsoft Teams. Hal ini juga memungkinkan untuk dapat diikuti oleh peserta dari seluruh Indonesia. Dan, untuk diketahui, pelatihan brevet pajak terapan IAI juga diperkuat dengan MOU antara IAI dan Direktorat Jenderal Pajak. IAI juga memiliki kompartemen akuntan perpajakan. Yang salah satu kegiatan rutinnya adalah menyelenggarakan regular tax discussion yang mengupas isu perpajakan terkini. Pelatihan brevet IAI hadir di 6 Knowledge Center di Jabodetabek. IAI Knowledge Center Menteng, Moy, Serpong, Kedoya, Fatmawati, dan Sumarekon Bekasi. Selain itu, dengan standarisasi nasional, pelatihan brevet IAI juga hadir di beberapa IAI wilayah di Indonesia. Nah, jadi tunggu apa lagi? Ayo segera daftar pelatihan brevet pajak terapan IAI. Pelatihan brevet IAI, ahli pajak, bedah substansi, temukan solusi.
Langkahmu, gerakmu, hadirkan semangatmu, hatimu dan mimpimu, satukanlah dalam asamu. Tunjukkan baktimu, kuatkan imanmu, raihlah prestasimu. Satukan tujuan, siapkan masa depan, jaga akuntabilitas. IAI mengabdi, bersatu dan berbakti, untuk Ibu Pertiwi. Selalu berkarya dan jaga integritas, Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. Langkahmu, gerakmu, hadirkan semangatmu, hatimu dan mimpimu, satukanlah dalam asamu. Tunjukkan baktimu, kuatkan imanmu, raihlah prestasimu. Satukan tujuan, siapkan masa depan, jaga akuntabilitas. IAI mengabdi, bersatu dan berbakti, untuk Ibu Pertiwi. Selalu berkarya dan jaga integritas, Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia.
Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, akuntan profesional unggul, Indonesia maju. Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, IAI, telah berkiprah mendukung pembangunan SDM dan transformasi ekonomi Indonesia.
Akuntan memiliki peran penting dalam pembangunan nasional yang berkesinambungan.
Profesi akuntan mendukung upaya peningkatan profesionalisme SDM Indonesia agar bisa optimal berkarya mendukung pembangunan ekonomi yang efisien dan transparan.
experience to make a difference to your world. Choose a difference maker. Choose a chartered accountant.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat datang dalam acara Puncak Kiai Apafest 2020, Scanning the Horizon, Embracing the Future. Setelah 3 kali penyelenggaraan yang sukses, IAI pada tahun ini menggelar Apafest secara virtual. Babak ini merupakan babak yang paling dinantikan oleh seluruh peserta kompetisi Apafest 2020.
Bagaimana para akuntan profesional itu bisa memberikan suatu percepatan, outcome base, dan juga efisiensi, dan bisa meningkatkan produktivitas.
IFAC, through its network of member PAOs and other partner organizations, is the voice of the professional accountancy organization.
Berharap seluruh profesi akuntansi memiliki ikrar untuk terus meningkatkan profesionalitas, kompetensi, dan integritasnya.
Tantangan akuntan muda pada saat ini tidaklah kecil, karena harus bersaing dalam konteks global. Maka itu harus meningkatkan hard skill dan soft skill, dan mulailah untuk membangun networking. Hal ini bisa dilakukan dengan aktif dalam organisasi profesi seperti IAI ini, mengikuti konferensi dan seminar, serta kompetisi ilmiah.
Pada generasi muda akuntan Indonesia yang menjadi peserta di Apafest, saya berharap agar para akuntan muda juga mampu menguasai teknologi. Jangan pernah berhenti belajar. Manfaatkan kesempatan untuk memperdalami dunia keilmuan dan pengalaman berbisnis, sehingga kemampuan kalian dapat terasah.
Jadi di sini profesi akuntan juga harus mendukung BUMN yang lebih transparan dan bertanggung jawab kepada negara dan masyarakat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 4th Finance and Business 2030 event part of the Building Resilience series.
Gabung Brevet Pajak Kiai, pilihan tepat untuk Anda.
hadirkan semangatmu, hatimu dan mimpimu, satukanlah dalam asamu. Tunjukkan baktimu, kuatkan imanmu, raihlah prestasimu. Satukan tujuan, siapkan masa depan, jaga akuntabilitas. IAI mengabdi, bersatu dan berbakti, untuk Ibu Pertiwi. Selalu berkarya dan jaga integritas, Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. Langkahmu, gerakmu, hadirkan semangatmu, hatimu dan mimpimu, satukanlah dalam asamu. Tunjukkan baktimu, kuatkan imanmu, raihlah prestasimu. Satukan tujuan, siapkan masa depan, jaga akuntabilitas. IAI mengabdi, bersatu dan berbakti, untuk Ibu Pertiwi. Selalu berkarya dan jaga integritas, Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the IAI and AMCI joint webinar, ASEAN CPA and Ease of Doing Business in ASEAN. This webinar is also supported by ASEAN Federation of Accountants, AFA. My name is Monica Nabilia, and I'll be your host for today's session. In this lovely afternoon, I would like to greet our honorable guests, President of IAI, Bapak Profesor Mardiasmo, Head of Division of Finance Profession Development at Finance Profession Supervisory Center, Ministry of Finance, Bapak Ari Wibowo, who also Head of AMCI, IAI Council Member, Ibu Profesor Lindawati Gani, and Bapak Isnaini Ahdiat, Member of AMCI, Bapak Trianto, Ibu Andara Mona, Ibu Dia Anggreni, IAI Executive Director, Ibu Eli Zarni Husin, our distinguished panelists, Ibu Sagita Mucho, Bapak Iskandar Panjaitan, Bapak Fijong Tius. Also our moderator, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start this event, we would like to invite you to sing the national anthem, Indonesia Raya.
Indonesia
Ladies and gentlemen, to open this webinar, let us hear the opening remarks from Professor Lindawati Gani, YAI Council member who also member of AMCI. To Professor Lindawati Gani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Monica. Honorable Professor Mardiasmo, as a President of IAI, Bapak Ari Wibowo, as a Head of Division of Finance Profession Development, Finance Profession Supervisory Center, Ministry of Finance, all board members of AMCI, Ibu Andara Mona Sinaga, Bapak Trianto, and Ibu Dia Anggraini from Supervisory Center of Ministry of Finance, Ibu Elizarni from IAI, and distinguished speaker of the Asian CPA and Ease of Doing Business in Asian webinar, and all distinguished guests. Good afternoon and greeting to all of us. Let us convey our praise and gratitude to the presence of God Almighty for His mercy and grace as we are able to organize the Asian CPA and Ease of Doing Business in Asian webinar. I would like to thank all of you for attending and participating in this webinar. The Accountancy Monitoring Committee Indonesia was established to facilitate the implementation of Asian MRA on accountancy services in Indonesia through coordination with relevant stakeholders, including the professional accountancy profession, or PAOs. AMCI is the committee responsible for organizing matters related to the implementation of the Asian-wide mutual recognition arrangement and was formed based on the mandate of the Asian Mutual Recognition Arrangement on Accountancy Services, in particular Article number 6, which state that each Asian member country must establish an accountancy monitoring committee. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me, Lindawati Gani, as the board member of AMCI, to report several matters related to the holding of the webinar today. Webinar with the theme of Asian CPA and Ease of Doing Business in Asian were organized by Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia in collaboration with AMCI. This webinar is based on the publication from the World Bank regarding the indicator of the ease of doing business and investing in various countries. This publication can be a reference for policymakers, strategic planners, business people, including regulators, in carrying out various business development and investment activities in their countries. Through this webinar, participants are expected to be able to take insight from all sources and keynote speakers about activities and opportunity that can be taken from the Asian CPA and the ease of doing business, especially in Indonesia. Today's webinar is held online through the Zoom webinar application and YouTube Live in order to expand the participant coverage and to comply with the government directive related to the enforcement of community activity restriction, or PPKM. The speaker for this webinar consists of Ms. Sagita Mucho, Senior Private Sector Specialist, Finance Competitiveness and Innovation Global Team from World Bank, Bapak Iskandar Panjaitan, the Director of Trade and Services Negotiation, Ministry of Trade of Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Finjong Tius, President Director of PT Kalbe Pharma Tbk, and Bapak Isnaini Athiat, Council Member of IAI. On this occasion, we can report that the registered participants for this webinar have reached almost 1,200 registrants of participants. on behalf of AMCI, we would like to thank the President of IAI, Prof. Mardiasmo, and Bapak Ari Wibowo, as well as to all the distinguished speaker and participant for their participation and contribution so that the Asian CPA and the ease of doing business in Asian webinar can be held smoothly. Hopefully, this webinar will provide optimal benefit for all of us here today. Stay healthy and safe, and may the Almighty God bless us together. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Linda Watigani. Before move on to our next agenda, I would like to say hi to Bapak Gatot Trihargo, the chairman of IAMI. Thank you for coming, Pak. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite the president of IAI, Professor Mardiasmo, to deliver the opening speech to also open this webinar officially. To Profesor Mardiasmo, the floor is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Monica. Yang saya hormati Bapak Firmansyah N. Nasaruddin, yang pada siang hari ini akan dibagi oleh Pak Ari Wibowo sebagai Kepala Pusat Pembinaan Profesi Keuangan, also Board of Member AMCI, and all Board Member of AMCI, Pak Trianto, Bu Andara Mona Sinaga, Profesor Indawati, and Ibu Eli Zani Husin from IAI, Bapak Irwan Hasfir from IAPI, Bapak Agung Nugroho Sudibyo, and Ibu Diah Anggreni from IAMI, also Pak Gatot Trihargo, head of the IAMI. Speakers of webinar ASEAN CPA and Ease of Doing Business in ASEAN, Ms. Sukita Muko, sebagai Senior Private Sector Specialist, Finance, Competitiveness, and Innovation Global Team from World Bank, Pak Iskandar Panjaitan, Director of Trade and Service Negotiation, Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Wijong Tius, President Director of PT Kapi Pharma Tbk, and also Bapak Isnaini Ahdiat, Member of the IAI National Council. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and greetings to all of us. We continue to express our gratitude to Allah SWT, God Almighty. For His grace, we can organize the ASEAN CPA and Ease of Doing Business in ASEAN webinar. This webinar is collaboration between IAI and AMCI, just Linda Watigani mentioned, in order to convey information dissemination and the development of the accounting profession in Indonesia. Appreciation is also conveyed to all speakers from the World Bank, Ministry of Trade, PT Kapi Pharma, and from the IAI National Council. We believe that the presentation from all of our speakers will be valuable insight for all of us in navigating the turbulent future of the global economy after COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, talking about the ASEAN CPA and the development of the accounting profession in the ASEAN regions, the data shows that Indonesia is the biggest contributor of ASEAN CPA holder in Southeast Asia. This is based on the high interest in the accounting field in Indonesia. Citing data published by the Asian Chartered Professional Accountant Coordination Committee, or ACPACC, as of June 2021, of the 5,447 ASEAN CPA holders in ASEAN, 1,947 are coming from Indonesia. Overall, the number of Asian CPAs from Indonesia is currently ranked first with 35.7%, ahead of the other ASEAN countries with the cost being Malaysia with 24%. EIE is the largest contributor to ASEAN CPAs in Indonesia, with 1,309 of the ASEAN CP holders from Indonesia, of 67.2%, are holders of Chartered Accountant or CA certification issued by IAI. It can be said that the EIE has made a significant contribution to the development of the accounting profession in Southeast Asia. Therefore, the holder of Chartered Accountant EIE must become a finance and business leaders, not only in Indonesia, but also in the Southeast Asia region. With CA, professional accountants have the opportunity to become ASEAN CPAs. The professional accountant designation that have been mutually agreed upon by 10 ASEAN countries through the mutual recognition arrangement or on accounting services, or we call it MRA on accountancy services. Moreover, as a member of International Federation of Accountants or IFAC, Chartered Accountant Worldwide, and ASEAN Federation of Accountants, EIE shall ensure that the network of Indonesian CA holders is always relevant to professional development and the global economies. Ladies and gentlemen, related to this webinar, globalization in business has become commonplace in the last few decades. This has been reinforced by recent advances in technology and more relaxed government policy and welcoming foreign investment. The webinar, this is collaboration again between the Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia or IAI and AMCI, is expected to provide insight into the activities and opportunities that ASEAN CPA holders can take in today's global economy, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic that hit the world. By saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, let's start the webinar. The themes ASEAN CPA is of doing business in ASEAN. After this, let's listen to the keynote speech that will be delivered by Mr. Ari Bowo, Head of Division of Finance, Profession Development, Finance Profession Supervision Center, Minister of Finance, Republic Indonesia. May that Almighty God bless us together. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mardiasmo. I would like to also welcome Bapak Tarko Sunario, the Chairman of IAPI, and also IAI National Council Member, Bapak Dadang Kurnia, and Bapak David Sejabat. Thank you for joining us. And now I would like to ask Bapak Professor Mardiasmo and everyone in the panelists to open the camera because we will have a group picture. So I would like to ask Bapak Gatot Trihargo, Ibu Linda Watigani, Ibu Elizani Husin, Bapak Edward Tanujaya, our panelists, to open the camera. And please to hold the smile for 5 minutes because we're going to have a lot of group picture. Okay, I'll count to 3. So please team, help me. 1, 2, 3. Another shot. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will share the group picture definitely. Move on to our next agenda. Let us hear the keynote speech from the Chairman of Finance Profession Supervisory Center, Ministry of Finance of Republic of Indonesia, which will be delivered by Bapak Ari Wibowo, the Head of Division of Finance Profession Development of PPPK, Ministry of Finance. To Bapak Ari Wibowo, the floor is yours, Pak.
Okay. Thank you, Monica. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Hereby, on behalf of Pak Firmansyah, Head of Finance Profession Supervisory Center, he sent his apologies that he cannot join this important webinar, but he already prepared his speech that I will deliver. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greeting to all of our honorable guests and speakers today. Prof. Mardiasmo, Chairman of IAI, Pak Tarko Sunaryo, Chairman of IAPI, Pak Gatot Trihargo, Chairman of IAMI, Prof. Lindawati Gani, and also our speaker today, Ms. Sagita Mucho, Mr. Iskandar Panjaitan, Mr. Isnaini Afdiat, and also Mr. Vijong Tios, and at last but not least, but my warmest welcome to all participants of the webinar ASEAN CPA and Ease of Doing Business in ASEAN. First of all, let us offer praise and gratitude to Allah because without His mercy and grace, we won't be able to attend this online seminar brought to you by the Accountancy Monitoring Committee of Indonesia, collaborating with the Institute of Indonesian Chartered Accountant or IAI. Hopefully, this webinar with the topic ASEAN CPA and Ease of Doing Business in ASEAN will bring new insight and knowledge for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, the journey towards an integrated ASEAN economic region has begun since ASEAN was founded in 1967. Although the initial goal was to bring about peace in ASEAN region with the economic progress of its member, the leaders of ASEAN countries held ASEAN Summit in 1992, which resulted in the establishment of ASEAN Free Trade Area within a period of 15 years. After considering the importance of trade in services, the ASEAN member countries signed the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services on December 15, 1995. AFAS provides broad guidelines for ASEAN member countries to improve market access progressively and ensure equal national treatment for service suppliers in ASEAN, one of which reached an agreement to create more free trade in services in the ASEAN region. As the follow-up to the implementation of the AFAS agreement, on August 24, 2014, at Napiti, Myanmar, the delegates of ASEAN member states signed the ASEAN Mutual Recognition Arrangement on Accountancy Services. One of the agreements was the equalization and competence and expertise of professional accountants who have met the requirements in all ASEAN member countries. Furthermore, based on Article 1 MRA on Accountancy Service Document, the objective of these arrangements are to facilitate mobility of accountancy services professional across the ASEAN member states, to enhance the current regime for the provision of accountancy services in the ASEAN member states, and to exchange information in order to promote the adoption of best practices on standard and qualification. In line with the topic of today's webinar, to achieve the objective of the MRA, one of the consequences for the member countries is related to the adjustment of domestic regulation and the preparation of infrastructures such as human resources, business process, and etc. to provide ease of doing business and facilitate mobilization. We hope this webinar can promote one of the MRA objectives related to mobilization in the accounting services, which has not fully realized in the ASEAN member countries, including Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to refresh and explore further condition of Indonesia's ease of doing business among ASEAN countries related to the strategic role of the accounting profession in Indonesia. Based on data in Doing Business 2020 published by World Bank, Indonesia is ranked 73 out of 190 countries globally. Furthermore, within the scope of ASEAN, Indonesia is ranked 6th compared to the other 10 ASEAN countries. In this case, Indonesia is still below Singapore, which is ranked 2nd globally, followed by Malaysia, Thailand, Brunei, and Vietnam, which is ranked 70th globally. This data shows that there are still rooms for improvement for the government and all elements of society to promote convenience, effectivity, and efficiency, and which ultimately leads to an increasing ease of doing business. The ease of doing business will eventually enhance the community welfare, especially in starting a business, enforcing contract, trading across border, and registering a property. Additionally, regarding to the role of accounting profession, although the getting credit indicator is not in the highest ranking, yet its value is quite competitive at 7, ranked 48, compared to the Singapore at 7.5, which AODB level is 2nd globally. Indirectly, this shows that the accounting profession also has a vital role in shaping this value and is expected to be improved continuously, particularly in credit registry coverage and credit bureau coverage, which in this case, the practicing accountant and the management accountant in realizing bankable financial statement and the public accountant profession in providing assurance on financial statement. As we know, financial statements are one of the benchmarks for financial institutions or banks in determining a company's financing decision. Apart from the getting credit indicator, accounting profession's role is also reflected in the protecting minority investor indicator. In this indicator, one of the aspects of the measurement is related to disclosure, transparency, and corporate governance, especially those associated with minority investor protection. Under these circumstances, conformity and implementation to international standard and further regulation in preparing financial statements are indispensable in establishing a good governance climate for financial reporting entities. The government appreciates the Accounting Standard Board in Indonesia, which is currently the AKIAI, that has overseen the Indonesian financial reporting standard in achieving the one global accounting standard, although there are still opportunity for optimization. With all the conditions that I already mentioned previously, the government has identified potential and sign of improvement related to problems in financial reporting through the construction of the draft bill on financial reporting, which is one of the government's 2020 to 2024 national legislation program. During the bill construction, several important points become our concern, such as establishment of the financial reporting data center, government and simplification on the financial reporting procedure, the role and the responsibilities of the reporting entity and related parties, and regulation or reformulation related to the financial reporting standard setter. Those whole process will certainly create an ideal financial reporting ecosystem that will provide added value to economy, which will indirectly advance Indonesia's value in ease of doing business. I hope this webinar will provide inspiration and input for all of us, which in the end will have a positive impact in improving economic quality of ASEAN and Indonesian in particular. I would like to close my keynote speech with a quote from Vince Scully. Good is not good when better is expected. I apologize for the shortcomings in my speech. Enjoy the webinar. May the Almighty God bless our every step. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Head of Finance Profession Supervisory Center, Firmansyah N. Nazarudin. Thank you, Mbak Monica.
Thank you, Bapak Ari Wibowo, for the keynote speech. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion today, I would like to read the housekeeping matters that will apply during the webinar. The first one is during the webinar, please post your question into the Q&A box. The moderator will curate the question and discuss them with the panelists during the Q&A session. During the webinar, participants should set the microphone on a mute position to reduce the noise. The webinar is being recorded for our documentation purpose. I would like to also inform you that to obtain the e-certificate, all of the participants need to join our survey and answer the right keyword. The link will be provided at the end of this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's start our discussion for today, the ASEAN CPA and ease of doing business in ASEAN. This webinar will refer to the relevant key findings from the World Bank publication, highlighting the pros and cons of several ASEAN countries, also to highlight the key policy, strategy, and initiative to introduce by the Indonesian government and IAI to build the capacity and competitiveness of Indonesian accountants. As the panelists, we have Ibu Sagita Mucho, the Senior Private Sector Specialist, Finance, Competitiveness, and Innovation Global Team, World Bank. We also have Bapak Iskandar Panjaitan, the Director of Trade in Services Negotiation from Ministry of Trade of Republic of Indonesia. We also have Bapak Vijongtius, the President Director of PT Kalbe Pharma Tbk. Also, we have Bapak Isnaini Ahdiat, the Council Member of IAI. The session will be led by Bapak Edward Tanujaya, the Director, Member of Partner Service IAI. Before we pass the session to Bapak Edu, let me read a brief CV of Edward Tanujaya. Edward Tanujaya is a Director of Member and Partner Service IAI. He is also a lecturer at the Department of Accounting, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Edward obtained his undergraduate in accounting from Faculty of Economic and Business of Universitas Indonesia and his Master of Science in International Business from Rijksuniversiteit Groningen. Edward is Chartered Accountant Indonesia and also ASEAN CPA holder. Ladies and gentlemen, we let Pak Edu host the session.
Thank you, Monica, for the brief introductions. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of webinar, good afternoon. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. My name is Edward Tanujaya, and you can call me shortly Edu. It is an honor for me to be the moderator today. Therefore, I'd like first to greet our distinguished guests and speakers. First of all, Professor Madiasmo, President of IAI, and then Pak Ari Wibowo, Head of AMCI, and also Head of Division in Finance Profession Supervisory Agency, who represent Pak Firman Nasaruddin. I hope Pak Firman is in good conditions. And then I like to greet Bapak Tarko Sunario, President of IAPI, Bapak Gatot Trihargo, President of IAMI, members of AMCI, first of all, Professor Lindawati Gani, as a representative from IAI, and Ibu Elisani Husin, Executive Director of IAI, Ibu Andara Mona, and Pak Trianto from PPPK of Finance Profession Supervisory Agency, and then Pak Agung Gros Dibyo and Ibu Eni Nadia Anggreni from IAMI. I also like to greet IAI National Council who attends today's webinar, Pak Dadang Kurnia, and then Pak David Jabat. Thank you for your attendance. Before we start the webinar officially, I'd like to invite all of us to join together in a moment of silence to remember Mr. Suhartono, member of AMCI from IAPI, who had passed away on Saturday, July 7, 2021. May his soul rest in peace, and Pak Suhartono, I'm sure he bless us way from home. Let us have a moment of silence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your prayer. Ladies and gentlemen, the World Bank has released the 17th publication of doing business in 2020 that has been a reference for policymakers, strategic planners, decision makers when assessing which country or regions for conducting business and investment. The publication of Doing Business 2020 is an annual studies that investigate regulations that enhance business activity, but also that create a constraint on it. The publication actually shows that developing economies are catching up with the developed economies in doing business, but also there's a gap that remains. On the other hand, the launch of ASEAN Free Trade Area, or AFTA, has been a pivotal point for increasing goods and services flow in the regions, especially among ASEAN members. AFTA has facilitated the Mutual Recognition Agreement, or MRA, in accountancy services, which established the ASEAN CPA designation. It is expected that ASEAN CPAs will play a significant role to facilitate the growing investment in the region through enhancing the quality of financial reporting, assurance, and accounting practice in Southeast Asia. To further facilitate implementation of ASEAN MRA on accountancy services in Indonesia, AMCI, or Accountancy Monitoring Committee Indonesia, was established through coordination with relevant stakeholders, including the PAO or professional accountancy organizations. As one of the recognized PAO Indonesia, IAI, or Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, or Institute of Indonesian Chartered Accountants, in collaboration with AMCI, is organizing this webinar with theme in doing business in ASEAN to discuss the relevant key findings from the World Bank publications, and also how Indonesian government respond to the findings by formulating key policies, strategy, and initiatives introduced. Also, how business may take the opportunity in the regions, and finally, how PAO, like IAI, and also all the professional accountants as members can contribute to the capacity and competitiveness in capacity building. Ladies and gentlemen, Monica has introduced some of the name of the speakers, but I like to call our first speakers today, Ms. Sagita Mucho from the World Bank. I like to read the short biography of Ms. Sagita Mucho, who is a senior private sector specialist with the World Bank's Investment Climate Unit. She has numerous works on business environment reforms around the world, including Indonesia. Sagita holds Bachelor of Arts in Economics from University of California, Berkeley, and Master of Public Administrations in International Development from Harvard University. Ms. Sagita Mucho, I'd like to invite you. The screen and the time is yours for the next 30 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me. This is so well organized that I almost feel that I am there with you. My name is Sagita. I work, as the moderator said, I work for the World Bank's Investment Climate Unit. This is a global unit that is supporting and working with governments around the world to improve the business environment and to make it easier to do business by changing processes and laws and regulations that achieve that. I mostly work on East Asia myself, including Indonesia. I see somebody is sharing my presentation. I can also do that myself, but that's fine if we continue like this. I will be very happy to also answer questions when we finish the presentation. So please note down your questions as we're discussing the presentation together. So there's several things that I want to talk about in the next 30 minutes with you today. So if we can move to the next slides. First, maybe we talk a little bit about what the Doing Business report is of the World Bank, what the finding is of the findings are, especially for East Asia and ASEAN countries, of the last report, the Doing Business 2020. And then we will talk a little bit about what are some of the good practices in certain aspects of the ease of doing business of the countries that have reformed the most and have are ranking better than others. So we can learn from those experiences. So if we can move to the next slides. So first, the Doing Business report is an annual report of the World Bank. It looks at regulations in 190 countries. So it looks at the entire life cycle of a business. So from the beginning, when we start a business, to business operations, when workers are employed, getting construction permit, for example, to construct a building, connecting to electricity. Then when we do a sale of property, how to register, the process for registering that property. Then certain aspects of getting credit. Then looking at the protection, the legal protection of minority shareholders in a company. Then the procedures and the processes of paying taxes, the procedures and the processes of importing and exporting. Then when there's issues in the business, how to enforce a commercial contract in court. And then finally, how to resolve an insolvency case when the business is in trouble. So it's looking at all of these areas basically of regulation. And both the regulation, what is in the law, and also what it happens in the practice in each country. Next slide, please. So the focus is there are some limitations though to this report. First, it focuses mostly on local SMEs. It focuses on the formal sector. It looks only at the situation in the largest business city. In some countries, there's 2 cities if they are too large. And what is especially important to note is that it uses standardized scenarios, which also provide for limitations in the index and the construction of the index, because it doesn't capture a whole range of different scenarios, but it looks at only one scenario for the purposes of having the index being comparable across the countries. So it's important to know these limitations, and it's important to understand that it provides only one measure of the business environment through many, right? So it doesn't show everything of the business environment in a country. Next slide, please. And this is the cycle of how the report collects and verifies the data. So usually there's there's questionnaires that are distributed to every country, both to the private sector representatives and to the public sector, and they collect this information from both private and public sector. And then they engage, the team engages with governments through different video conferences or visits to the countries. And then they write the study. So every year they collect the data from February until end of the summer, and then the report is usually published towards the end of the year. You might know that last year there was no publication of the report for several different reasons, but this year the data has already been started to be collected, and the report will be published at the end of this calendar year. And one thing that I wanted to mention here with the Accountants Association is accountants are also a key contributor to the data collection for the Doing Business report. They usually contribute specifically for the paying taxes indicator, because that's the indicator where mostly accountants are involved in. Next slide, please. Sort of having talked about what the report is doing, I also wanted to touch just upon the why we are measuring these particular areas. And literature has showed us that regulations that are business friendly are associated with growth. So there is an association. An improvement in the ease of doing business score is associated with increased business creation, reduced poverty, increase per capita annual growth, and more job opportunities. So these are the reasons why we look at these areas and how they are connected together. And in the next slides, it shows that it is also, if we can move to the next one, it is easier, like a greater ease of doing business is associated also with higher level of entrepreneurship, which is something that is very important for growth of countries. So here you can see the ease of doing business score and the association with the Global Entrepreneurship Index. So these are some of the reasons why it's important to look at these areas specifically. Next slide, please. So we will go a little bit into a discussion of what are some of the findings of Doing Business 2020, the last report. If you look at this slide, you see that developing economies are the ones that implemented most of the reforms in the past year. And here the year is 2018-2020 because that's the year that the report measures. And here you can see for each region how many reforms, the number of reforms that each region did, the percentage of the share of economies that reformed in each region, and the average number of reforms for economy. So if you look at just on the sides, on the right-hand side, East Asia and Pacific, you can see that 48% of the countries have made reforms in the past year, and together they made 33 reforms in the past year. This is only for the past year, only like for 2018, 2019. Next slides, please. So if you look at the change in time, so in the past 10 years between Doing Business 2010 and Doing Business 2020, you see this graph shows the change in the Doing Business score in these 10 years, and you see who has been reforming the most. And you see that the change here, the positive change is led by China and by the ASEAN bloc, right? So you see China has made the biggest improvements in the past 10 years. And then we have ASEAN, we have Brunei, and we have Indonesia right next to it. Then followed by Vietnam, Mongolia, Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar. And then we have the smaller Pacific islands that are a little bit lagging behind. It's important to know that because it's relative to other countries. So sometimes countries, even if they do not worsen, if they do not make a lot of improvements, then other countries get before them, then it looks like they are going backwards. But in fact, even if you don't do anything, it's in a way it's you are going backwards. And so the income, it's one thing that I also wanted to note is that the income of the countries doesn't seem to matter too much. So the improvers are of mixed income. So we have China that is upper middle income, and we have Brunei that is high income, but then the rest of the countries are lower middle income countries. So it doesn't mean that rich countries are moving faster than countries that are a little bit less rich, right? And in the East Asia and Pacific, we had several of the countries that were top reformers. There's usually the Doing Business report looks at publishes the 10 best reformers every year, and China was such a reformer in 2019 and 2020 reports. Also, Brunei was in 2018, 17, and 11. Thailand was in 2018, and Indonesia was a top reformer in 2017. So this is just to show that, which are the countries that have moved faster and improved the most. Next slide, please. So here I just wanted to look at what in the East Asia and Pacific area, what are where have the reforms focused the most? And then you see that most of the reforms have focused on starting a business, on improving insolvency, as well as credit and construction permits, increasing access to credit and construction permits. So you see here in the graph for access to credit, there have been 70 reforms in the past 10 years. For starting a business, there have been 18 reforms, or I think there's a little bit of a mistake here in the numbers. But then you see like the main one, basically insolvency and construction are the rest. One thing I also wanted to mention is on the paying taxes area. This is there's been a lot of improvement here as well, and you see that compliance, the average compliance time for East Asia and Pacific has fallen from 272 hours per year to comply with all the payment of taxes, filing and payment, and it has moved to 173 average in the past 12 years. So you see in the graph on the left-hand side how this has been going down through the years. Next slide, please. So here in the past, in the last report, in the Doing Business 2020 report, these are the countries of East Asia and Pacific, and highlighted in a brighter color are the ASEAN countries. So you see that Singapore is ranking the best in East Asia, but it's also the first in the ASEAN countries, followed by Malaysia and then Thailand, and then the rest of the countries. Myanmar is the ASEAN country that is ranking the worst in the report. And this is based on the score, and the score of the Doing Business report ranks from goes from 0 to 100, with 100 being somehow thinking of it as the frontier of good performance. So 100 is the best possibility of performance, and so this is how. So it shows, the score shows how far from the best possible good practice are these countries. Next slide, please. So here we look at just the ASEAN countries. You see here Indonesia is somewhere in the middle, and again Singapore is the first. It's followed by Malaysia and Thailand, and then it's followed by the group of Brunei, Vietnam, Indonesia, and then the last group is Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, that are doing a little bit worse than the others. And next slide, please. So I also wanted to look at how are the ASEAN countries doing in terms of each of the areas, right? And this is the average for ASEAN, and you see that the area where the average is best is on starting a business, and in fact this is an area that has been most improved even around the world. This is an area where countries have undertaken the most amount of reforms on starting a business. And then you see that also getting electricity is an area that ASEAN does pretty well on average, and as well as trading across borders and paying taxes to a certain degree. And some of the areas that the average is the worst is enforcing contracts, resolving insolvency, and perhaps protecting minority investors. These are also some of the areas where the biggest legal change is necessary, and obviously sometimes it takes very long in many countries to introduce these legal changes for these important laws like insolvency. Also enforcing contract is one of the areas that is hardest to improve generally. Next slide, please. This shows the reforms that have happened in the ASEAN countries in the past 2 years. So covered by the last two reports, Doing Business 2019 and Doing Business 2020. And for each of the areas, where were most of the reforms done, and which country did them? So as you see, again, starting a business was the area that was most where most reforms were achieved in the past 2 years. It's followed by construction permits, getting electricity, then paying taxes and contracts, trading across borders, property, getting credit, and then protecting minority investors. And you see in each box which the countries that made these reforms. For example, Indonesia and Philippines, they improved starting a business in 2020. Again, Indonesia improved in 2019 as well on starting a business, along with several other countries. Other areas, so in 2020, Indonesia made a lot of improvements. You can see here for getting electricity, for paying taxes, for enforcing contracts, for trading across borders, and most of these improvements had to do with sort of putting procedures online and making more simplifying these procedures through online provision of services. Next slide, please. So in time, if you see since 2004, these are only a few examples from the region, and you see what is really the difference, apart from the score and what the score means, but what is really the difference in practice of measuring these reforms. And you see that, for example, for Thailand, for registering a business, and in the case of business registration, the report looks at registration of an LLC. It took 35 days to do that in 2006, and it takes 6 days to do that in 2020. For paying taxes for Vietnam, it took 1,050 hours to file and pay all taxes for a medium-sized company, and now in 2020 it takes 384 hours a year. The example of Malaysia with construction permit, it took 285 days to get a construction permit in Malaysia in 2006, and it takes 53 days in 2020. In the example of resolving insolvency in Indonesia, it took 6 years to resolve an insolvency case in 2004, and it takes 1.1 years now in 2020, after all of the reforms of insolvency have taken place. So this is just to show that there is change, tangible change that comes from these reforms in practice and for the business community. Next slide, please. So I wanted to touch a little bit upon what were some of the changes that two of the better performers in ASEAN and Malaysia and Thailand, which were the ones that are ranking better after Singapore, but they made improvement through the years more than Singapore. So I wanted to touch upon what these two countries have worked on specifically. And for Malaysia, so they made 11 reforms between doing business 2017 and 2020, and these are the areas where they focus. So the first one is the implementation of electronic services, including an online single window to carry out property searches, electronic forms for export-import, online registration and e-filing and e-payment for the goods and services tax, for the VAT. Second, in terms of process improvement, they eliminated different inspections during construction permit applications and eliminated site visits during electricity connections. And these were duplicate procedures in the processes. Also, they enhanced risk-based inspections at customs and reduced physical inspections. And on the legal side of the reforms, they made changes to the Companies Act to introduce option of reorganization and insolvency procedures. They strengthened corporate transparency as well with the same changes to the Company Act. And they issued a lot of administrative instructions and circulars related to changes in construction permits and electricity connections. On the next slides, we look at what the areas that Thailand improved. So they did 16 reforms between these two reports, GB 2017 and DB 2020. And again, they implemented a lot of electronic services, e-registration for businesses, e-payment for taxes, electronic land maps, e-receipts, e-transition, which is the electronic customs clearance systems. They introduced court automation, e-filing and e-payment at courts, e-insolvency, case management, and other services that were electronic. They introduced many processes, introduced a flat rate for business registration, eliminated requirement to obtain a company seal, and a requirement to approve work regulations with the Labor Department. They reduced the required issuance time for occupancy permit in the construction permit process for smaller, low-risk buildings, and introduced phased inspections as well. Improved electricity installation processes and increased transparency of electricity tariffs, and also reduced the time to comply with corporate income tax because of the availability of spreadsheets that were embedded with formulas and tax rules that allowed taxpayers to compute corporate income tax automatically. And in terms of legal reforms, they did a lot of these reforms through one law. It was a law that introduced amendments to many different laws to facilitate the ease of doing business. Kind of a little bit similar also to the omnibus law that Indonesia approved recently, that introduces many different amendments to different laws that relate to the business environment. Next slide, please. So we talk a little bit, I mean, this is part of the good practices that we spoke about Thailand and Malaysia, but I want to talk a little bit more in general in the world. What are some of the good practices of the countries that have reformed the most and that are doing the best in terms of the ease of doing business? So if we can move to the next slide. I mean, as you saw from the examples of Malaysia and Thailand, this is what the features that we see across the world of those countries that have been improving the most. So many of these, if we look at the 20 best performing countries in the world, all of them have online business incorporation. All of them have electronic tax filing. Many of them have a unified collateral registry, and most of them have a very sound and transparent business regulation. So, and this is mainly looked at through the quality indexes of each of the different areas that the doing business looks at. So these are, you know, these are features that are repeating in all of these good performing countries. Next slide, please. And some of the trends, right? So these countries that are doing better and that are reforming the most, they have certain features in common. Well, the first one is they have strong information-based and data-centric systems, especially for the areas of starting a business, getting credit, property, and paying taxes. These data-centric systems are very important. A second principle that they put in place is a risk-based approach to regulation and supervision, which is quite important, so that the state uses less resources and focuses those resources on those companies with the highest risk, right? Not everyone equally. So this is important also for starting a business, for construction permit, for trade in the customs procedures, and also for paying taxes, obviously. A third feature is that these countries have legal frameworks and institutions that provide strong property right protections, right? And property rights is at the basis of a good development for any country, and it's linked to secure transactions, to insolvency proceeding, to enforcing contracts, right? So this is quite an important feature that the countries have in common. A fourth point is that they have citizen and business-centric versus government-centric services, right? So they try to have integrated service delivery through a one government type of policy and effective data sharing. And finally, most of these countries, as you saw, since most of the trend is to move all procedures online, and especially in the past 2 years, this has been even more important because of the COVID situation. Most of the countries, all of the countries that do well and have reformed the most, they have updated their regulatory frameworks and institutions to leverage technology. And this is really like the latest, the strongest trends in a way that we've been seeing, right? So regulation framework, regulatory frameworks for e-transactions, for e-documents, for e-signature laws, and everything else. Next slide, please.
Sagita, you have 8 more minutes, yeah?
Okay, perfect. I'm close to finishing.
Thank you.
So just I wanted to mention some of the good practices in 2 particular areas that I thought would be more important also for the Accounting Association. The first one is starting a business, and the second is paying taxes. So for starting a business, obviously, it's the most reformed area. A lot of countries are already doing very well, right? So the good practices are putting procedures online, not to have a paid-in minimum capital requirement, the creation and improvement of one-stop shops, having standardized forms, not to have the courts involved in the process and administrative process of registration, and having fixed registration fees. In the next slide, we look at the good practices for paying taxes. And again, it's the same trends, offering electronic filing and payment to reduce operational cost and increase tax compliance, adopting a single one tax-based system, adopting principles of self-assessment for tax collection, and strengthening the tax administration to support productivity. Next slide, please. So here you see just how the transition from manual to electronic filing has been going around the world, right? So since 2004, 63 countries have introduced online systems for filing and paying taxes. And as of the last Doing Business report, 106 countries have these systems in place, right? And this movement to move to electronic payment of taxes, filing and payment, has cut tax compliance times globally. And you see here for each of the regions how it has fallen, right? From the first bar is Doing Business 2016, the second one is Doing Business 2020, and how of the time, right? The time to file and pay taxes, the annual time that it takes for companies on average. And you see also the second biggest change is for Asia, East Asia and Pacific, right? So moving to online systems does have a proper effect on cutting compliance times. Next slide, please. So I want to also just spend 3 minutes to talk about what another feature that I think is very important that we've seen in the countries that are doing very well is the institutional setup for reforms. And apart from what we talked about now, why do we have to reform these regulations and what is the content of the reforms, what we have seen that is very important is how you actually undertake this change, right? So creating institutional mechanisms for reforms has been very important for these countries to succeed. Especially for the lack of coordination that usually exists within governments to undertake some of these reforms, right? So these setups and coordinations are key to identify and prioritize reforms and to ensure the successful implementation of reforms. And high-level leadership is very important, but it's not enough, right? There needs to be a system where accountability and escalation mechanisms exist to assess their implementation of reforms. And if we move to the next slide, some of the challenges that we see is coordination issues, lack of information sharing among government agencies, political economy issues. There's resistance to reforms often within different agencies. There's a lack of mechanisms to support these reforms, overlapping functions sometimes within government agencies. And also there's challenges related to national, subnational coordination, right? And in Indonesia has also a lot of these challenges. But so some of the solutions for this is to have coordinating, a high-level coordinating agency that has the political will and endorsement at the highest level to direct and supervise investment climate reforms. And having in place protocols for interagency communication and coordination, and effective, and what is most important, and here the Accountant Association is important too, is to have in place effective consultation mechanisms with the private sector. The private sector should be the key partner for the government to understand the challenges and to have systematic feedback loops to get feedback from the private sector on both what are the challenges, but also how is the implementation of certain reforms going. Next slide, please. And these are some of the features of these type of coordination mechanisms, right? You need to have leadership at the highest political level and clear accountability mechanisms. You need to have some sort of a long-term vision with clear objectives. You need to put in place an inclusive reform with an appropriate institutional mechanism, having detailed implementation plan with measurable goals that are monitored, and the private sector involvement and effective communication. That's one of the key points. Next slide, please. Again, these are some of the countries that have done best, have organized. They have a high-level oversight mechanism, a coordinating unit, and then technical working groups that have worked towards these reforms. Malaysia and Thailand have been particularly strong at this, having had in place these mechanisms that were backed, that were backed by the highest level of the governments, and coordinated the reform efforts across the government. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide. So in terms of how ASEAN can support the improvement of business environment, these are just some ideas. I think country-to-country learning events within ASEAN are very important, right? So there's countries within ASEAN that have had so much success. And for different areas, you know, different countries can be picked, but Thailand and Malaysia are definitely two of the ones that have done the best, and they have a lot of valuable experience to share. So these South-South peer learning events are usually very important, and I think they need to be leveraged more. One other idea would be to have some sort of efforts to conduct regional harmonization of legislation, right? One example is that of OHADA. It's the Organization for the Harmonization of Business Law in Africa, where 17 West and Central African states are members. And this organization has driven many reforms in these member countries, right? By sort of looking at what are the issues across the countries and having model laws and using these model laws for example, a model company law that then many countries adopted as their own. You know, so several of the important pieces of business legislation can be harmonized at the more regional level. I know that ASEAN has been very active, especially there was a program to unify or to simplify starting a business processes across ASEAN. So that has given some benefits, and especially on the trading across borders area, it's definitely something that has pushed a lot of the unification through the single windows of the countries in the ASEAN region. So that was it from me. I'm very happy to answer any questions and to continue this discussion during the Q&A session. Thank you very much. I hope I was on time.
Thank you, Sagita. It's just on time, very on time, 30 minutes.
Great.
With a full package of information. I believe audience enjoy your presentation very much. Other than reading, is a very important stakeholders here. So I like to invite the second speaker today, Pak Iskandar Panjaitan from Ministry of Trade. Pak Iskandar Panjaitan is the Director of Trade and Services Negotiations, Ministry of Trade Republik Indonesia. Pak Iskandar earned his bachelor degree from the Faculty of Agriculture, Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta, and also then he obtained his master and doctoral degree from Tokyo Daigaku University, majoring in agriculture and resource economics. I invite Pak Iskandar to outline what are the governments of Indonesia policies, and then and how the governments will endorse business to place from Indonesia to play and learn from other Southeast Asia countries, as Sagita has presented. So Pak Iskandar, time and monitors will be handed over.
Services including the accountancy will help ASEAN to achieve the objective to transform ASEAN into a single market and production base that will improve trade in services, particularly in ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, or AFAS, and the ASEAN Mutual Recognition Arrangement, or MRA, as well as ASEAN Movement of Natural Persons Agreement, or ASEAN MNP Agreement, and incoming ASEAN Trade in Services Agreement, ATISA. The second part is strategies related to the market access for accountant services with the UN classification code CPC 862. And the third is initiative we approach to enhance the utilization of the MRA, including MRA in accountancy. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start this presentation by describing the policies taken by the Ministry of Trade, in particular, Directorate of Trade in Services Negotiation related to trade in services, and how Ministry of Trade of Indonesia taking part in ASEAN, mainly in negotiation of ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services and ASEAN Mutual Recognition Arrangement. The Directorate of Trade in Services Negotiation Ministry of Trade has a role to lead the delegations of Indonesia in negotiating meetings under ASEAN Coordinating Committee on Services, or CCS. The Coordinating Committee on Services was established in January 1996, subsequent to the signing of the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, or AFAS, The CCS comprises officials responsible for coordinating liberalization in trade in services and are generally represented by the officials from the Ministry of Trade or Commerce or Economic Planning Agency. Under the terms of reference of ASEAN Coordinating Committee on Services, the CCS shall assist the ASEAN economic ministers implementing the AFAS Movement of Natural Person Agreement and ATISA, ASEAN Trade in Services Agreement. At present, there are 4 sectoral working groups established under CCS, namely HSSWG for healthcare services, BSSWG for business services, TISSWG for telecommunication and IT services, and LTSSWG for logistic and transport services. The BSSWG itself oversees several committees and council, one of which is ASEAN Chartered Professional Accountant Coordinating Committee, or ACPA-CC. ACPA-CC's rules is regulating the ASEAN Chartered Professional Accountant, known as ASEAN CPA. For liberalization of trade in services in ASEAN, Indonesia has actively participated in developing ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, AFAS. It was signed on 15 December 1995 in Bangkok, and then became the legal basis for trade in services negotiation in ASEAN. The first schedules of commitments of AFAS, which is called as a first package, developed in 1996, and currently ASEAN has finished and implemented 9 packages of AFAS, in which each package was implemented through protocol which ratified by each IMS. AFAS latest development is the 10 package, which was signed in November 11, 2018 in Singapore. And until recently, Indonesia is still in progress of ratifying protocol to implement the 10 AFAS package. For future plan, the 10 package of commitment is the last package of AFAS and will be transferred to non-conforming measures, or NCMs, for ASEAN Trade in Services Agreement, or ATISA. Ladies and gentlemen, with the mandate from Article 5 in AFAS in 1995 about mutual recognition, at the 7th ASEAN Summit held in November 5, 2001 in Bandar Seri Begawan, Brunei Darussalam, ASEAN heads of states and governments mandated that the start of negotiation on mutual recognition arrangements to facilitate the flow of professional services under AFAS. Mutual recognition arrangement, MRAs, is an important initiative in ASEAN integration on trade in services. The MRAs facilitate trade in services by mutual recognition of authorization, licensing, or certification of professional services suppliers obtained in one ASEAN member state by other ASEAN member states. The goal of the MRA is to facilitate the flow of foreign professionals, taking into account relevant domestic regulation and market demand conditions. And how actually MRAs works? Firstly, host country is to have established qualification systems to be used as benchmarks. And then each IMS need to identify gaps, including gaps in qualification requirements, appropriate compensatory measures, and comparison of education system, for example, culture and socio-economic. And in the end, IMS need to implement recognitions of qualification, need to fill the gaps, but it means not necessarily automatic market access. The MRA on accountancy services itself was first signed in February 2009 in the form of MRA framework to encourage ASEAN member states who are ready to enter into bilateral and multilateral negotiations on MRAs on accountancy services. And further, an amended ASEAN MRA accountancy services was signed by ASEAN Economic Minister on 13 November 2014 with the objectives as follows: to facilitate mobility of accountancy services professional across ASEAN, to enhance the current regime for the provision of accountancy services in the IMS, and to exchange information in order to promote adoption of best practices on standards and qualifications. Under the MRA on accountancy, a professional accountant, or PA, refers to a natural person who is a national of an MS, who is assessed by the national accountancy body and or professional regulatory authority as being technically, morally, ethically, and legally qualified to undertake independent professional accountancy practice. The MRA works toward ASEAN-wide registration system, which allows registered professional accountant in ASEAN member state to be certified as ASEAN Chartered Professional Accountant, or CPA, and finally work as a registered foreign professional accountant, or RFPA, in other ASEAN member states. ASEAN CPAs are legally allowed to provide accountancy services under Central Product Classification CPC 862 of the United Nations, except for the signing of the independent auditor report and providing accountancy services that require domestic licensing in ASEAN market without having to undergo extensive retraining or requalification procedures. To implement the ASEAN MRA accountancy, each ASEAN country must set up its own monitoring committee to develop and maintain a process of submitting ASEAN Chartered Professional Accountants, or ASEAN CPA, or Registered Foreign Professional Accountants, or RFPA, applications to the ASEAN Chartered Professional Accountant Coordinating Committee, or ICPACC. Since each MS may impose different requirements and conditions to qualify and as accountancy professionals, to set up accountancy and to employ foreign accountants. Therefore, in granting mutual recognition, the MS will recognize the education, licenses, demonstration of competencies and experience may be the principal elements for consideration. Take into account the standards and guidelines set out by the International Federation of Accountants, and take into account the professional competency and qualification threshold for the practice of accountancy in MS. Ladies and gentlemen, as the lead of Indonesian delegation in ASEAN CCS and other negotiation forum, our strategies are to ensure Indonesia commitment across the services sectors is in various fora, including accountant services, which classify under Central Product Classification CPC with code 862. In ASEAN, Indonesian status of commitments of the 10 package of AFAS for accountant services actually only for bookkeeping services, except tax return is none for mode 1, for cross-border trade, and mode 2 for consumption abroad. For mode 3, commercial presence, the limitation on market access is joint venture with foreign equity participation up to 70%. This is as mentioned in Presidential Regulation number 44, 2016 year. And of course, some limitation of national treatment are none, as indicated in the presentation. For mode 4, movement of natural person, MS commitment including Indonesia are regulated on the other agreement text, that is ASEAN MNP agreement. On accountant services, the limitation for mode 4 is only applied for intra-corporate transfer and limited to executive, manager, and specialists with condition as follow. Stays are permitted for up 2 years and may be extended for a maximum of 2 times, which extension being up 2 years. Any foreign natural person supplying services are subject to charges levied by the government. An economic need test apply to temporary stay of manager and specialists. On the other side, status of commitment for accountant services in other MS are open, except for Myanmar and Thailand, which is still unbound. On the negotiation under ASEAN Plus, Indonesia only committed for accountant services only for bookkeeping services, except tax return in ASEAN India Trade in Services Agreement or AITSA. The commitment also none for Mode 1 and Mode 2. For the commitment Mode 3, there are limitations on market access, which is only through locally incorporated joint venture corporation in the form of limited liability enterprise with Indonesian individuals or Indonesia control corporation or both, and the aggregate foreign shareholding in the joint venture shall not exceed 30%. Moreover, Indonesia doesn't provide commitments to sector related to accounting services outside ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia also taking initiative to enhance the utilization of ASEAN MRA, which already implemented. The discussion started since the 95th CCS meeting on March 2020 to make sure the implementation of ASEAN MRA is on the track to reach the main objective, which is to facilitate the movement of providers, professional services in the ASEAN region. From sectoral working group report to the CCS, we note that there are 5,447 registered ASEAN CPA in June 2021. However, no data on actual utilization of ASEAN MRA on accountancy. To address the issue, several initiatives have been done. I would like to name the submission of a non-paper by Indonesia titled Utilization of ASEAN MRAs, Indonesian Views, and the second one in area studies on enhancing the utilization of ASEAN MRAs in facilitating mobility of professionals, and the third, the draft paper on the mobility professional under the BSSWG by ASEAN Secretariat. From the draft after BSSWG and area final report under study, there are similar points recommendation to utilize ASEAN MRAs. The IMS needs to work on several issues such as work and stay permit, lack of exposure and understanding of MRAs, subject to domestic regulation and MNPA agreement, immigration rules, harmonization in education, and lastly, collaboration through projects, exchange program, and so on, so on. In this last part, I would like to inform our accountants colleague about several way forward on ASEAN MRAs as follow. CCS requested area to undertake further review on the domestic regulations and map the issues affecting the mobility of ASEAN professionals to facilitate a more focused discussion on these issues. Indonesia has conducted a webinar on sharing information on accountancy practice in ASEAN by inviting speakers from Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam to increase the competency and standard ASEAN accountants. The webinar held at May 2021 before the latest SCP-SCC meeting on June 2021. There are some valuable recommendations produced by this webinar. It is expected that there will be some follow-up based on these recommendations. So CCS will share the SSWG paper on mobility of professional as additional reference to the area study. That's all my presentation. I'm open to the next discussion. I will return the screen to you, Edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Iskandar, for sharing the governments of Indonesia policy and initiatives. And it is very relevant for accountants because accounting profession is one of the services, yeah, Pak, that become part of the MRA. And then there's of course there's an issues, yeah, of the implementation of MRA, but there's a lot of opportunity for accountants of Indonesia to be play in the Southeast Asia markets and or Southeast Asia regions. There are a lot of things need to be done, Pak, because but importantly, through the MRA, at least we can promote together the best practices for accountants in Indonesia, so that we can easily later on, if possible, to be mobile in the regions. So that's from the services side. So Pak, please hold a moment, Pak, because we wait for the Q&A discussion later. So I like to also remind our participants, if you have any questions, please type your question in the Q&A side, so that we will ask the questions during the Q&A and discussion session later on. So if Pak Iskandar highlight the importance of the services agreements in Southeast Asia, where there's an opportunity for accountants to work outside Indonesia, in particular in Southeast Asia regions. Actually, business in Indonesia also have the same, facility, the same opportunity as well to conduct business and investment in Southeast Asia regions. So we are honored today to have the third speaker from Pak Vijongtius, President Director of PT Kalbe Pharma Tbk. I think all of you who are participants in this webinar know Kalbe Pharma, especially during these challenging times. Probably some of you also consume the product of Kalbe Pharma. But Kalbe Pharma is also not that they open business, they open investment also in not only in Indonesia but also in other Southeast Asia countries. So that's why I like to invite Pak Vijongtius later on to discuss this. But beforehand, I like to read a short bio of Pak Vijongtius, who is President Director of PT Kalbe Pharma Tbk since 2017. He earned a bachelor degrees in economics from Trisakti University in 1985. And Pak Vijongtius actually is an accountant by education. He began his career as a public accountant firm in Dr. Yusuf Susilo and Partners, and was also a lecturer at Trisakti. But then afterwards, Pak Vijongtius has a very long experience in pharmaceutical industry, working with the Dankos and then SFA Putra Mega Trading, the KB Pharma divisions, and now he become director and also president director of the KB Pharma. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Pak Vijongtius to share the experience of KB Pharma in ASEAN markets for the next 15 minutes, Pak. So, Pak, the monitor is yours, Pak. Please.
Okay, thank you, Pak Edward. Nice to see you, and nice to see you again. Very good afternoon, and then so warm greeting to all distinguished speakers, panelists, all participants, ladies and gentlemen. And also, I like that you say that I'm accountants. It's true that I have to witness that when the tagline of EAE, proud to be accountants. So I'm testimony that I'm very proud to be accountants.
You're proud accountant, Pak Vijong. We are proud of it.
Okay, thank you. Just to start that, I prepare a few slides. Please, I think organizing can help to share the slides. And before that, I think in this good opportunity, I would like to also special thanks to our governments, represents by Minister of Finance, Minister of Trade, Minister of the Foreign Affairs, Minister of Health, and also BPOM, because all these governments, our government representative, continuously are working very hard in these ASEAN regions to negotiate in terms of free trades, in terms of the regulation reforms, in terms of the all the collaboration, country government to government, including the private sectors. I think this one of the is very good to see that this working together with all the government in the ASEAN region is very good, and being one of the players in these regions, we are really witness the benefits of having our business in the Southeast Asia regions. I can share my slide from my computer, Pak Edward, if I may. Oh, okay, it's all right. Yeah, this few slides just to recap what we are doing and what we are experiencing. Just the first two slides explain about Kalbe Pharma. So this year, Kalbe celebrating 55 years anniversary, being a pharma company, a healthcare company in Indonesia, and with a comprehensive product portfolio, especially in all healthcare, from the prescription pharma, consumer products, nutritionals, and as well as the distribution and logistics. And we are also a public listed company. So we are very welcome that all the public stakeholders to join our story, to join our expansion in the Indonesia and also the other regions. And if you see in the next slides that this just briefly about our product range. So I think we try to provide all this healthy product into our customer, Indonesia and also the Southeast Asia regions, especially in these very difficulty times, in this pandemic COVID-19. So we are work very hard, not only Kalbe, but also collaboration with so many university, laboratory, research institutions, governments, and also the private sectors to provide COVID-related products and vitamins, including vaccines. So I think we can spend more time about the discussion about this innovation. But in the next few slides, you can. I just want to describe what we are doing so far. I think a lot of the positive point that hearing the sharing from the World Bank talking about the how to do the business in Southeast Asia. So we can see a lot of good things from the other country. For example, like when Sagita mentioned about the good practices. I think we are really witness that a lot of the good practices happening in the ASEAN countries. So that's why it makes the Southeast Asia becomes a very attractive regions for the expansion, especially in our area, which is healthcare. Because why is very attractive? Because in terms of population, it's a growing population, economy is growing, stability is more stable, is very stable in the ISO institutions. And governments exercise, I think both all the ASEAN governments try to harmonize the system. We have a lot of discussion about the harmonized system in the healthcare, starting from the tariff barrier. We also see the harmonized system in the registrations, regulation, quality system, and so on. So I think we see a lot of the progressing there, including the free trade area, free trade zones. And Kalbe, we are committed to expanding in these ASEAN footprints. We are trying to expand. Knowing the market, I think is very important. We also learn how to be a culture about the specific countries in terms of including the regulation, etc. And in order to be mitigating the risk, when they mention about risk mitigation in these Southeast Asia regions, Kalbe always open for collaborations. So we do in every countries in ASEAN, we always have a partner. We always have a distribution or the a local partner in specific countries, including services. When you mention about accountants, you mention about the legal, about the advisory, manufacturing, logistics, marketing. We do a lot of collaboration just to say that doing together, growing together is one of the good points for the future business growth, including the people competence. Because we cannot understand everything in every countries. So we need to build a local people competence combined with the local people there and working together. So in total, we have more than 300 people surrounding the Southeast Asia regions. Next slides, please. So when you talk about the how to know the market and regulation, especially about the talking about regulation, when Sagita mentioned about the transparency and also leveraging technology. It's real happening in the several countries there. I think Actually, in the last 3 years, Myanmar is a very good example, but unfortunately, recently they are falling apart because of the local government's problem there. So we see that at that time it's a lot of improvement, but now it's being going back to the previous 5 or 10 years ago. So I think transparency, single window policy, everything is very good for the in the Southeast Asia regions. And Calbe, we are very successful working together with all partners in that particular countries, including like HR. We also working with the in that HR expert in that country, also some of the accounting firm and so on. Collaboration is one of the very good solution if you are talking about non-tariff barrier. We realize that there's still some challenges in the several, Southeast Asia region countries in terms of the practical business practices in that country. So that's why we, in our experience, using the collaboration is one of the good solution to mitigate all these non-tariff barrier, and in fact we can accelerate our expansion in that targeted countries. Again, talking about people, so being multicultural organizations, engaging all the local people, build a local expertise is one of the very successful in penetrating in these Southeast Asia regions. So that's why when I mentioned about risk mitigation, opening the, again, some of the country already implement the risk-based approach, where the mentioned in the report of the World Bank is also happening, and we are very happy that healthcare is one of the sector considered as a low risk in that countries. And we are, I think, even like collaboration with the local partners, one of the good points. Next. So what we are looking at, what we are doing now and for the future, we can see that one of the positive point that we can share to all participants here, that extending collaborations is one of the benefits to doing business in Southeast Asia. And then we expect that healthcare will be one of the hub in the Southeast Asia region. So what we are doing now is we are always welcome for the joint working in terms of the manufacturing, marketing, research. We do a lot of the clinical trial research, multi-center in the Southeast Asia, which is currently conducting with some of the research institution in Singapore, in Malaysia, Thailand, and the other countries. So we see that, especially like COVID-19, we also do a lot of the collaboration. So hopefully we can do it better and more in the future, just to see that making the ASEAN will become a healthcare hub, and we can more independent and more prepared in terms of supply chain to serve all the population in Southeast Asia regions. And also it's very good that mentioning about digital transformation. It's also stated in the World Bank report that one of the leveraging that technology is, that's true that telemedicine is one of the very good applications or solutions to getting closer to the all customer or the patients, especially in this COVID-19 condition, where a lot of the people stay at home, and we still can have the online consultation and serving the medicines or supplements into their home. So this is one of the benefits. So if we can accelerate the process, it's one of the very good benefits. And the other point when I mentioned about the ecosystem, this is one thing that, this is one of the Indonesia example, and we hope that we can extend this successful building orchestrating ecosystem in Indonesia population or the farmer network, especially the herbal and the natural based products can be extended into the other Southeast Asia regions. You can see the next slide, the example that what we are doing now in Indonesia, talking about the red ginger. So we have more than 1,000, probably more than 10,000 farmers now working together with this red ginger area. And we are building up our network, our ecosystem up to the 25,000 in the near future. including the coconut tree, coconut plantations, coconut drink for the plant-based products in the future. So including also the vendor management in the Southeast Asia. So this is some of example that our journey, our steps, and just to conclude my presentation, that I think this is one of the collaboration is always one of the key points. Being innovative to accelerate the process, to accelerate the research based. So we are not too dependent, but we can independent in terms of the providing the healthcare in the regions. So thank you for the time and for the attention, and going back to you, Pak Edward.
Thank you, Pak Fijong. We have still time for you, but if I may, I like to conclude, Pak, so that we can have more time for later for discussions. I guess many in the audience would like to ask questions, because I think Kalbe is one of the champions, ya, Pak, to expand business in Southeast Asia. And I noticed that you confirm some of the result of study that mentioned by Sagita in ASEAN. Yeah, it is still attractive, region, even though I know that you experienced problems in Myanmar, Pak, recently. But don't worry. I think soon will be, we can overcome the problems there, because ASEAN is famous of the being harmonized, Pak. Yeah, ASEAN is famous of being harmonized. And the other keyword is about ini, Pak, collaboration. You mentioned about the collaboration; it's very important. There's also that include, content provisions as part of the stakeholders. That I believe you also include content provision, Pak, yeah, when you do the business expansions in Southeast Asia, and also another keywords that I also mentioned, that the importance of understanding, technology, digital technology, which also in some way will facilitate the business to grow and expand, and it's also part in Southeast Asia. Thank you, Pak Fijong. If I may, please hold on, Pak, because we have one more, speakers that will share the point of view of the accountant itself, the accounting professions. Pak Iskandar mentioned about the ASEAN CPA, and hopefully ASEAN CPA can go together, work together, promote together business in ASEAN regions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next or last speakers, Pak Isnaini Agdiat, who is a constant member of IAI, but he also a partner in Ernst & Young Indonesia. And Pak Isnaini is, accountant, but also IT expert, Pak. So if Pak Fijong mentioned the importance of knowing technology and digital, Pak Isnaini cover both accounting and digitalization technology. So we coined the terms techno accountant, Pak. As Pak Isnaini, even though by education he is a bachelor accountant and master of accountancy from Universitas Indonesia, currently he's doing PhD dissertations focusing on information system. So Pak Isnaini, I give you around 10 to 15 minutes, for you to deliver presentations about the importance of ASEAN CPA, Pak, in facilitating activities of doing business in ASEAN countries. Pak Isnaini, the monitors will be shared to you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Edu, Pak Fijong, Pak Iskandar, and other speakers. Good afternoon, everyone. I see that the number of participants today in this afternoon is 500 more. So I think this event is very interesting. So let me use my presentation slide to explain about ease of doing business, and in particular Indonesia, because the other or the previous speaker I think has covered ASEAN in general, but in particular, I think it's also important to reflect ourselves about what we have achieved. And rather than telling there is a problem about the score of the ease of doing business, I would rather see that as an opportunity to improve. And I'm always happy to see that there is a big room for improvement for Indonesia. That means maybe we just need to do one simple things, but then with the has a high impact to the economy. So can we skip the screen, then start with the presentations, page 1, please. So we have noticed already about the doing business rank, and the rank is 73 and out of 190. And this is really a bit like, I think, challenge. I mean, if you see the previous score in the 2018 and 2019, relatively about the same. So yesterday I tried to investigate and understand further in which area actually Indonesia can improve. So if you see the graphic at the bottom, there is the starting the business and then enforcing contracts are those two which I think requiring serious attention from the government majorly, and those which participate in the developing and implementing policy and executions. So again, this is as a member of the G20. I think Indonesia has the potential to exit the stagnant rank, I would say, because the past 3 years seems to be like, I would say, stuck in that level. So let us explore what are the things there that we can improve. So go to the next page, please. So apparently, if we see the area whereby the score is the lowest is enforcing contract, and in there I make an area which under the area that is highlighted over there, the score for this enforcing contract, the time or days is 400 days, so it's too long. And then the cost as percentage of the claim value is 70%. So that means the cost of enforcing contract whenever there is a dispute, it's long and costlier, very costly. So this is an area that we need to work out. I understand those attorneys may enjoy this, because they are consultants, right, in this area. But this is also requiring attention for the process itself. Why it took so long, and then what can we make it shorter? Yeah, and I believe the digitalization, as Edu mentions, I have a background in IT. I think digitalization or digital transformations in all the services that is provided from the government, I think it will help a lot to create an efficiency. So going to the next page, please. I'd like to further down the analysis to the enforcing the contract simulation. As you can see at the table at the bottom left, I make a comparisons between Jakarta and Singapore. So in terms of number of days, it's already like double in terms of like enforcing the contract. And again, about the cost in relatively to the claim value, which is costlier, as I mentioned, and the quality of judicial process, the index is right at in the middle, which is not good. And we really need to make the judicial processes keep being improved. And if you see there is another table at the bottom right, of course, with the lengthy process, then the attorney will require time to spend to ensure that everything is okay. So that's why the fee is becoming costly over there. Go to the next page, please. Likewise, this is an indicator that I'd like to make a comparisons with New Zealand, for example. A number of procedures. I just take a chance to look at how we can create, starting a business, for example. So in the New Zealand, because of all making it the process is streamlined, so they have one procedures only, and not as many as we have. While Indonesia has already a lot of procedures, the number of days are impacted and it becomes 10 times. And then the cost in relation to the percentage of income per capita becoming so very expensive. So in here again, we need to see how the analysis from the fiscal standpoint, I think, would enable us to see how we can create an efficiency. We may create an easiness in terms of doing business by reducing charges to the business startup, which then after they can enjoy, the start or the process of establishing the business, then they can create income, and ultimately they pay tax anyway, right? So we need to balance those things, I think. So continue to the next page, please. So another area that I think Indonesia needs to improve is in the trading across border. And that means, you know, the activities of export and import. This is also an area whereby if we compare, if you see at the bottom left, you know, comparisons with the East Asia and Pacific and the OECD, the high income countries, you know, the time to export is also relatively longer. The cost to export is also relatively higher. So again, you know, this will require an investigations further how we manage our process more efficient. There are a number of documents that is required when we are doing export and import as well, but how can we make that more automated? And the digitalization or the digital transformation in this process will definitely help a lot and improve the score of ease of doing business. And the next slide describes about the trend of investment realizations from 2015 to 2020. And I think the good news in here is somehow with all the situation that I described just now, cumulatively in the 2020, which is last year, Indonesia's investment realization has reached 800 trillion, about 49 to 50 relative to FDI and DDI. That means increased by 2% compared to 2019, which I think relatively still good, and it absorbed about 1 million Indonesian labor in around 150,000 investment projects. We still need to do a lot to make sure that there is an increase year by year, because we need the economic grow by having those investment, be it the local or this foreign direct investment. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So if you see the way World Bank look at Indonesia, and other countries as well, because this use the same measure. I already laid down these table comparisons comparing the 2018, 19, and 2020. It will be very interesting to see that there are a topic, for example, dealing with construction permits and enforcing resolving insolvency. You know, for the past 3 years, maybe there are things that we do, but it's not being recognized as significant enough to make our score is getting higher. You know? So we really need to do something and innovate. What can we do in those areas, especially the dealing with construction permits and resolving insolvency. Yet I have to say that the 2020, the government has established an online platform for business licensing, improved the reliability of power supply, and then introducing an online filing and payment system for the major taxes and some other things that we have done. But again, with the fact that the score is relatively still low, we need to do even more. And with the today's condition, I think whereby we introduced an omnibus law, for example, it will help a lot of the ease of doing business in Indonesia. But then let us look at that on the next screen. Go to the next page, please. Yeah, so this is what we've done in the 2021. So the Ministry of Investment, for example, is being established in April a few months ago to enhance the ease of doing business in Indonesia. And we also set a clear target of investment in the 2021, which is an increase by 1%. So hopefully it will reach 900 trillion with all the constraints that we have in the pandemic situations today. Hopefully it still can be achieved. And the omnibus law EVAC, I think because this was started in November last year, maybe it hasn't been accounted for in the World Bank report of ease of doing business. Then we will expect to see the score will be increased after these implementations of the omnibus law, not only about these job creations, but also to enable the small medium enterprise. And in particular, because we have the situations of pandemic, of course, the strategy must work. And the government has set this strategy, for example, in the setting up a business entity, for example, we already, adopt a mindset of changing from red tape, which is more bureaucratic, to the red carpet. And then, of course, there are also an OSS, which I think previously another speaker mentions about the risk-based OSS. I think that will also facilitate to prioritize the work through the system, which enable faster processing. And then also, I've seen that providing fiscal incentive services such as tax holiday, tax allowance, super tax deductions, which I also noticed, will also enable us to create a better score in the ease of doing business. So let me close my presentations with the recommendation. And I think some of us may have noticed that, but I think it's important also to always, keep on track of what we've done. So what we are going to do, for example, here is in this pandemic environment, of course, the investor is waiting to see the high vaccinations of people. Hopefully soon we can achieve the herd immunity. Going towards the year end, I noticed that Bappenas is planning to achieve this by the herd immunity by the first quarter 2022. But with the fact that currently there is this new variant, I think it's important to accelerate the vaccinations across Indonesia. And positivity cases, it's hard to say, but it's a reality, even if currently it is very high because of the testing activities so high, but it is good for us to know and make a treatment, right? So after that, then I hope the increase will start slowing down in terms of number of cases. And then lockdown and PPKM, which is the restrictions today. I would rather use the word restrictions. Issues handling, which is, I think, is very important, that after we are defining these restrictions, we are able to see the number of cases drop, and we can continue to intensify the business activities, including tourism, I think. And recommendations number 2 that relates with the supply side, I think this is talking about the labor side and including accountants. And I think this is what Edu asked me about, how we can improve the skills, and in particular, digital skills is very crucial in here. Our ability to analyze that data, our ability to streamline the process, our ability to make digital transformation in our organizations, including in this particular context this afternoon, is in the government sectors. Yeah. If you see recommendation A, mostly related with the Ministry of Health, and B is relating with the Ministry of Labor. C relates with the infrastructure enhancement that relates with the Ministry of Information and Communications, because I think we also need to improve that digital service, and an integrated ICT and transportation system then is a must to increase the score of ease of doing business. And finally, I think this is the most important for all accountants that works closer to the process of, especially on those ministries. And maybe there are also BPKB that can also help to increase the governance, which also means by doing digital, we can also make it things transparent and more efficient. And then ultimately, then this efficiency will create the higher score for ease of doing business. I think that's all, Edu, my material for presentation. I understand there may potentially many questions about what accountants should do in respect with this ASEAN market. So I'm happy to take up question after this.
Thank you, Pak Isnaini, for sharing us the backgrounds of what is important that for accounting professions, in responding to the publications that World Bank has issued for some years over back about doing business, ease of doing business. Pak Isnaini already mentioned the issues in Indonesia that are actually improved by, from time to time. Yeah, even though other countries probably improve much faster, but yeah, we cannot be that pessimistic. But I think Indonesia is still attractive in one side. But of course, there's a homework that we need to do. Yeah, Pak Isnaini mentioned about the importance of increased productivity of labor, infrastructure enhancements, and then in particular also for digital technology, and then also this is the area that accounting profession can jump in terms of transparency and governance. I think that's very much needed. Thank you, Pak Isnani, for sharing the perspective from you. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are, as Pak Isnani already mentioned, we got 530 something audience join this webinar in Zoom. And also I noticed there are almost 150 or more than 150 joined through YouTube of II. So we got 600 something audience joining our webinar today. So I think everyone's very enthusiastic to know what the issues of doing business in ASEAN and what's the impact for accounting professions. So if I may, I'd like to invite all the speakers to turn on the video. Yeah, everyone already. So we still have 25 to 30 minutes to go. So if I may, I'd like to invite you to the discussion sessions and Q&A. So I'd like to read some of the questions from the audience. But before that, I like to use my right as moderator to ask one particular questions applicable for all the speakers. Well, nowadays we have challenging times that we face the COVID-19 pandemic since March of 2020 in Indonesia, and even before that. So we have been 20-something months here during the pandemic. Okay, so of course the journey of the past 20 months changed a lot. Changed the way we do business, the way company are run, and then the way the service sector should perform. So I like to ask one short questions here. What do you think about the pandemic COVID-19 impact for the business, particularly in Southeast Asia regions? Do you see there's any changes here in the response of doing business? And then for the government, for example, is there any policies that change or improve? Yeah, and then when Sagita's colleague will publish doing business in 2021, for example, will it be any drastic improvement or drastic changes in the regions? So perhaps I ask Sagita first to respond, then to Pak Iskandar and so on. Sagita, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the other speakers. The presentations were all very interesting, and thank you to the last speaker, I think Mr. Isnaini, that went into the details of how Indonesia is doing on the Doing Business report. I think that was a very good compliment to my presentation as well. So on your question, I mean, there's what we've seen in terms of policies around the world that governments have used to respond to the pandemic, right? I think there's two main areas that relate to the business environment that we have seen. The first is definitely the digitalization of services, right? This is because of the restrictions that the pandemic puts on mobility. Many governments have really sped up the process of digitizing their services, and I think this is it has been easier for those governments that were a little bit more prepared or more advanced in some of these policies of digitalization. But we've seen a major jump, a major push for reform in digitalization, so that a lot of the services that before were only able to be provided in person, they could be provided digitally because of the mobility restrictions, right? So that's one thing. But related to this, I also want to say that digitalization is not an answer that solves all of the issues of business procedures, right? Before going to the step of digitalization, governments have to think about how to simplify the procedures, right? Before, so having a simplified procedures in place, and then you put them, you make them digital. Otherwise, there's many mistakes that governments do in terms of wanting to digitalize too fast, and then you cannot digitalize. Digitalization doesn't solve the problem of burdensome administrative procedure per se. So I think the step before is to make sure that procedures are simplified even before we move to the digitalization step. And I think the second point, the second policy that we've seen that's been the governments have reformed very quickly has been around insolvency, right? Because businesses have suffered so much during the pandemic, a lot of them might have, find themselves in insolvent position. So you need to have a system in place through which businesses can move from that insolvency position to putting the capital back into the market, right? So creating a new businesses with new ideas or whatever. So you need to have a system in place that through which businesses can go through and solve these insolvency cases as quickly as possible, right? I think in the case of Indonesia, the insolvency system is already quite in good shape, right? But I think there might have been issues that have arisen during the pandemic that would require, further reform of the system. And in terms of digitalization, I think this is really like a key policy for Indonesia. I think for being the country that it is, with all the potential that it has, I think it could be in a better place in terms of the digitalization of services. And I think this is something that should be, and it is obviously the focus of the government through many of their policies. But I think this is something that can be fastened, made a little bit faster in terms of the reforms.
Okay, thank you for the additional comments, Sagita. Pak Iskandar, do you have any other things to share about the government policy and then also in particular the trade-in services, the impact during the pandemic situation, Pak Iskandar?
Thank you, Pak Edu. Thank you. Well, as you mentioned that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all the activities in all regions, including the ASEAN region. So this issue has been globally discussed in international fora such as in WTO, G20, APEC, including in ASEAN. So let me just to give some information what is the ASEAN agenda for tackling this issue. So ASEAN has launched several programs to assist businesses activities. One of them is called as ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, SCRF, which contains initiative in every sector, including in each economy. The two initiatives or programs under the implementation plan of the ICRF as adopted by leaders at the 37 ASEAN Summit that are called it by some forums, namely facilitate safe and speedy travels of suppliers of essential services in accordance with receiving countries' health protocols. So actually, we haven't had meaning of these essential services, so this is still under the discussion. But we know what would be the essential services themselves. So the second one is exploring the possibility of developing specific schemes to allow ASEAN professionals, especially those certified under ASEAN MRS, to provide services in other MS on a short-term basis. So one form of the implementation of this ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework is ASEAN is called as an ASEAN Travel Corridor Arrangement Framework, or ATCIF. So the framework aims to facilitate essential business travel among ASEAN member states while prioritizing public health safety. So to implement this ATCIF, ASEAN agrees to form an ad hoc task force to discuss and implement a TCIF. So Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia is the lead of the task force. Then the discussion is still going and are expected to be completed before the end of the 2021. So that is Edu, the agenda of the ASEAN, how to tackle this the effect of the pandemic in the ASEAN region. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Iskandar, for sharing the initiatives from the ASEAN leaders to facilitate how to anticipate the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the region. Pak Fijongtius, I know that your company is in some way play a very pivotal role during the pandemic. Is there any comments, Pak, regarding this pandemic situation, especially in Southeast Asia regions?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of the acceleration process in several countries. I think, of course, not 10 countries in the same maturity level. If you're talking about digital implementations, definitely you cannot compare Singapore with Myanmar. They are totally different. Singapore is definitely more ready about the implementation of the telemedicines. But I think in the other country like Philippines, they are very open, and we see a lot of good experience in the last 1 year when we are engaging our doctors, customers through the application in Philippines. I think this one very good move from the regulation as well as the policy, how to use the digital platform to communicate with the patients directly. I think the other country like Indonesia is sort of very welcome. I think a lot of the regulation reforms in terms of the providing the prescription online. I think this is one of the good thing that helps the patients. And the other benefit is talking about the how to accelerate the clinical trial. I think there are a lot of the country now is welcoming about the joint clinical trial, especially for the COVID-related products, including vaccines and stem cell and other some of the biologic products. So I think this is one of the good things. And I think Pak Isnani mentioned about the super tax deduction regulation in Indonesia. It's also thanks to the Minister of Finance that finally Indonesia have this kind of regulations after waiting so many years. I think probably it's a good for the research people, especially like healthcare and the others sector who conducting the research and developments in their industry. So I think one of the other point is talking about product registration. I think also a lot of the acceleration more relaxed in terms of the product registrations like herbal products, supplements, vitamins. Previously, it takes some time, but during the pandemic area, we see a lot of the acceleration. So it's shortening the process. This is one thing that is to support the this pandemic situation, and we can have the faster moving our products to the customer. This few points that we can see from the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing the experience, Pak Fijong. Pak Isnani, any comments about the impact of COVID pandemic, Pak?
Thank you, Edu. I think this pandemic, from the system perspective, as like human being, I just see that as like an exercise or a stress test. Our body should be elastic, given the fact that we have to flow the goods faster especially in the product that Pak Fijongtius produce, healthcare product, So after this pandemic, I think our country, economy system, all those things will be more elastic. And I think this is really a good chance. And many companies, before the pandemic, they are always focusing on the speed of the business. Sometimes they forget about the back office, right? At this time being, it is very important for us to take a look into the back office and how we transform it, because this is a good chance for us to reflect and creating and making an improvements of our supporting system. It can be an IT, HR, and many others. So I think that's my point of view.
Okay, thank you, Pak Isnani. So it is actually, I have a blessing in disguise, this pandemic.
I agree that.
That we need to simplify things. We need to take back, take a look back what we can simplify the process. And thanks to technology, I cannot imagine that if this pandemic happens, in the 50s and 60s, technology has enabled us, to keep being productive, even though we cannot meet together. And like this, we can do the webinar, we can talk, we can discuss across country, thanks to technology. If it has happened in 1950s, but I don't know, I don't think we can have such a global collaborations, as Pak Vijong also mentioned about the clinical discussion, clinical testing together. I think it's much way facilitated by technology. But there's some question that raised by audience, Pak. So if I may, I want to read it because we have a time clicking on. I know that some of you are very busy people, so we need to get faster. I want to combine two questions. Actually, one is from Pak Arfan Patahila. Actually, I will combine with question from Pak Erki Sugiarto. So first to Sagita, I think both questions can be combined as this. So in your opinions, what are the biggest problems in Indonesia? So that then how we can overcome so that these investment problems in Indonesia can be overcome, so that the investment climate can at least the same level in Malaysia, or our dream can be reached as the Singapore level. You mentioned that in Southeast Asia the champion is Singapore, and then followed by Malaysia and Thailand. Indonesia is still like behind of those three countries. So what are the problems in Indonesia, and then what we need to do? That's a question to to Sagita, and then Pak Isnaini are being asked about what accounting professions can help to overcome this investment obstacle, Pak. And probably Pak Vijong can, based on your experience, Pak, as a accountant, but also a president director of a regional company, your experience, Pak, in overcoming this. And Pak Iskandar probably will take a few from the government later on. So Sagita, any comments of these two questions?
Yes, so I mean, I think we discussed a little bit of this already before, and Mr. Isnaini gave a few recommendations in his presentation about what he thinks are the areas to focus on, which I completely agree with, and especially two areas that he mentioned I think are important. One is digitalization, which I think is something that we already discussed a little bit at length, and then the second area is governance of lawmaking. And I think one of the issues that we've been discussing in Indonesia has been how to make lawmaking and policymaking as transparent as possible, include feedback from the private sector, and not just produce laws and regulations, but also make sure that these are implemented in practice. And I think this has been also the focus of several efforts of the government to make sure that there is. So oftentimes, the laws are good. It's just they do not get implemented in practice as well as they should, and there's very many differences also at the regional, at the local level, right? So I think this is one area that merits a little bit more focus in terms of how to make this the governance of lawmaking as improved as possible, to make sure that there is implementation. Now, I want to mention also a few areas in terms of the, looking at the areas that the doing business report measures. First of all, I think in the past 2 years, the government has undertaken a lot of reforms which are not yet captured by the doing business report, right? Because it comes with a little bit of a lag and a delay. So the next report hopefully will we'll see some of those reforms captured, and especially as was discussed by previous speakers, with the omnibus law, there has been an effort by the government to improve certain procedures, including also the startup process for businesses, which has been also more digitized, and it's a bit easier to register a business in the country. So these things will hopefully be reflected in next reports. but this is something that I know that the government has been focusing on, right? On the area of starting a business. That's one thing. I think important for Indonesia, but in general also important for the development of any country are, in my opinion, there's two areas that are very important but also very difficult to improve. And one is enforcing contracts, and the other one is registering property. So looking at how is the judicial system in the country, right? It's a very key thing for the development of any country, and looking at how is the land administration of the country. In both of these areas, Indonesia doesn't do very well in the doing business reports. I think for land administration and registering property, there also has been the focus of the government for many years, right? And this is a very difficult and long process. And countries that have reformed these have taken, 10s and 20 and 30 years. And I think Indonesia has already started on this road to digitalize all of the land records and make sure once the property is registered, I think a lot of things are much easier for investors in the country, right? So a lot of effort has been put in this area. I think on the justice system, more effort has to be done. If you look at the index for the judicial processes, it's almost there's an automation, court automation index, and Indonesia almost gets 0 points on that. So courts are not at all automated. That process hasn't really started yet. And if you look at the countries like Malaysia and Singapore and Thailand, you see a lot more improvement there in terms of automation of the courts. And I think that speeds up a lot the process of enforcing contracts. So I think these two areas are quite important. Obviously, as I said, insolvency is an area that has more importance now in view of the pandemic. Indonesia is already doing well, and I think also there is some focus from the government to keep improving this area as well. And besides the doing business area, the last thing I want to say is that the doing business report, as I said in the beginning, is limited in terms of it captures only a few points of, and it is limited to a case study. It doesn't capture all of the business environment of the country. So beyond the doing business report, I think there's other areas that the government can focus on that are important, such as, for example, licensing. That doesn't really get captured by the doing business report, licensing of different areas of different economic activities. Also investment licensing, right? Like sort of the and I think one of the participants has raised this question as well. There are things that the doing business report only captures what is the situation for local businesses, not really for foreign investors. And this is an important how you deal with foreign investors and the procedures you have in place for foreign investors is something that is very important for the economy. Again, with the omnibus law and the changes that have been made and the opening up of sectors, I think this is something that the government has in its focus, but it's something that should be kept in the focus in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sagita, for the comprehensive overview of the questions. Pak Isnaini, any comments, Pak?
Oh, I'd like, I mean, among the presenter, I think it should be also allowed to ask questions. So I'd like to get some kind of like perspective from Sagita. Is there any study to say that, for example, if we increase the ease of doing business by 10 points, how much does it create an economic value or impact so that we can convince of ourselves that we have to really put efforts, tremendously in making it, because we'd like to be the five largest economy in the world by 2045, 100 years since our independence, right? So we use your reference, of course, because it is applicable for all countries in the world. So we really need to get that kind of study to just make convince for us to make a lot of improvement. As you see that it's gonna involve various sectors. So we really need to do a lot of coordinations, not only Ministry of Trade. Just now I heard it's Ministry of a lot. I mean, Ministry of Information and Communications, Ministry of Health, BKPM, yeah, if you see this, so it's very important. So is there any kind of study on
that? So there are studies that show that an increase in the index is associated with certain improvement in different economic indicators, right? But that, I mean, to me, it's not really I don't think that that's the most convincing argument. I would say the most convincing argument is just ask the business community, what are the main issues? And some of the main issues that they face are part of what the Doing Business report measures, right? So it's not, I don't think any country should be really so stuck on improving the index per se, but really more on the deeper side, improving the main challenges that the business community is facing. And this report only captures a few of those, not everything, all of the challenges, right? And out of those challenges, you pick the ones that the business community thinks that are more prioritized. That's why I was discussing before of the importance of having some sort of a systematic public-private dialogue in place so that you can, the government can be able to collect this evidence, right? The Doing Business report is just one little indication, and there's many other indices in place, but also the main source of information should be the business community, because things change so much faster on the ground that these reports can actually capture them, right? So I think it's important to establish this type of communication between private sector and government.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Pak Pijong, I know that you have another meeting, Pak Pijong, yeah. Can you have some comments, closing comment, Pak, before you leave the premise, Pak?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pak Edward. I'm sorry that I have to have another meeting for 4:30. I think regarding the comments about the how to make a better arrangement, I think they have 2 points. Usually, first is talk about the governance that mentioned by Sagita. I think that's one very important. And for business, usually it's talk about practicality. Any regulation, any reforms, anything, you have to be practiced. I mean, you have to do it very easy for all business. Yeah, not too complicated. This is something that I think that's true that if there are too many regulation, and then it's impractical. You have a lot of the socialization, understanding, everything. So I think if we have these two, I'm sure that all the new regulation or the relaxation, it will help all the industry, all sectors. And then I think this is the 2 points that for us is very important. I believe the other business also want to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Pijong. Yeah. I know that you have to leave now. Thank you, Pak. Again,
thank you, and have to keep in touch.
Thanks for you, Pak.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can coordinate more.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ibu Linda, Prof, and so on. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Pak.
Pak Iskandar. I think we are also running out of time, but I'd like to hear some comments from you, Pak Iskandar, about the current conditions, what the government will respond towards the situations nowadays. Please, Pak Iskandar.
Thank you, Pak Edu. Just short additional view. So, in addition to the unilateral policies that has been done by the government surrounding the ASEAN countries, including Indonesia. Well, of course, as a government, I believe that all the unilateral policy that has been done by the Indonesian government, including the laws that is named as a it is named as an omnibus law, but it is like a law of creating labors law. So all this, the unilateral approach by the government. But in addition to these policies, we believe actually the agreements on trade and investment on goods and services also hand in hand with these unilateral policies on creating certainty for the businesses as well as the investors. So actually, I'm as a negotiator actually facing difficulties how to have a kind of agreement with these many developed countries such as Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. And now we are doing negotiation with Canada as well as European Union. So you know that the norms as well as the disciplines actually is quite difficult to be faced. but this is actually the challenge for us, this opportunity for us. If we can agree, then this also will support the unilateral policies done by government Indonesia in order again to provide certainty for businesses as well as the investment. Thank you, Edu.
Thank you, Pak Iskandar. So actually, there are more questions that to ask, but we are limited by time. So before I close the sessions, I'd like to invite every one of you to give a short remark here, because all the participants mostly are professional accountants here that attends to the webinar. So can you give just a remark? What should accountant do or contribute here, so that countries or society or communities may have a benefit in doing business or investments, or in interacting, and entrepreneurships. What accountants can role that can play, so that what Sagita has mentioned about the importance of digitalizations or transparencies or simplifications policy that the government has done will bring more impact to one nations. Sagita first, probably. Pak Ismaili.
If I may, Sagita, sorry. I think there are many roles that accountants today take up in the organizations. They can be a financial accountant, they can be internal auditors. In the ministerial office, we have inspectorate general, right? And I think these auditors have to put their eyes toward bringing the digital government. I would say all the process being digitalized. And I take note from Sagita, who says that the policy has to take place first. And I totally agree with that. But the idea to drive transformations in terms of, making the process more automated, that is vital, because in an automated system, there is always like a digital footprint or timestamp. So we know where the process is stuck, and we can continually improve our process. And I think this Inspectorate General as an internal auditors in those ministries can play a role, as well as all the accountants who work as an information system specialist. They can start to have a roadmap of improving the digital service from all the government units. I think that will help a lot to increase the score of ease of doing business. And I would like to see next year the score of ease of doing business increase because of the effectiveness of applying omnibus law. A report from Sagita. I look forward next year. I have to leave, and thank you for inviting me here. Sagita, thanks a lot, and Pak Iskandar, salute on you. So we'll see you again.
Thank you, Pak Ismaili. Sagita, please.
Yes. So I mean, I think in line with what I said before, it's quite important to have for accountants, like any other profession, but to organize in a way that you have been doing now through the Accountants Association, to, as accountants are more in touch with the business community sort of on an everyday basis, it could be important to collect all of these issues. Like, what are the issues that are prohibiting businesses from, issues that for which the government can do something about, right? And then through an association such as yours, it could be important to channel these issues to the government, to the right places in the government, to have that feedback mechanism between private sector and government, right? And I think there could be a systemized way to do that, and that could be very helpful to the entire business community, right? So accountants can play a role in this regards.
Thank you for the comments, Sagita. Pak Iskandar, any final comments about the accounting professions?
Thank you, Edu. Just be related to the agreements. So please take benefit of the agreed ones, such as the ASEAN MRAs. And we have actually agreed on the annex on professionals in the Indonesia-Australia CPA, Indonesia-Korea CPA, as well as in the RCEP. So please be active and please be join. Please be also start to discuss with the relevant bodies in those areas. And we hope that by having kinds of discussion with the relevant bodies in all these members, we expect that Indonesia also can take a benefit the open market, as well as we can learn also the accountancy from the best practices from these areas. Thank you, Edu.
Thank you, Pak Iskandar. So I think we have a very marvelous discussion presentations today from different angles. So I think it will enrich us with a lot of informations, a lot of new knowledge, a lot of things, new things, yeah, for us as a content and also general audience. So I will not conclude anything because too many things to conclude, but I think many points that we can get. But I think we wish for one thing, Sagita. Hopefully the ranking of Indonesia next year in your publications, yeah, doing business will improve. Yeah, even though it's not everything, but it's a reference. Yeah. So hopefully next year, even though during these difficult situations, we still show some improvement. Thank you again, Sagita, for the sharing. Pak Iskandar, thank you very much for sharing the government's point of view. So yeah, unfortunately, the other two panelists has to leave earlier, but I think both also contribute significantly to us. So again, thank you very much. Back to you, Monica, as our MC.
Thank you, Bapak Edward Tanujaya. Also, thanks to Ibu Sagita Mucho, Bapak Iskandar Panjaitan, also to two others panelists, Bapak Fijong Tius and Bapak Isnaini Ahdiat, for a very fruitful discussion. It is indeed give us many beneficial insight about how doing business in ASEAN and how ASEAN CPA could play an important role. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also inform you, to those of you who have not applied ASEAN CPA, please do read the information and apply for ASEAN CPA. You can go to IAI website or AMCI website. Simply just type ASEAN CPA, the ASEAN CPA. As I informed you earlier, that we require all participants, both in Zoom webinar and YouTube, to join our survey and fill the right keywords to obtain the e-certificate. The link is already provided on your chat box, and it will be closed at 6 PM Jakarta time. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, the link will be closed at 6 PM Jakarta time. So make sure you join our survey and just fill the right keywords. And the right keyword is Accountancy Monitoring Committee Indonesia. One more time, the right keyword is Accountancy Monitoring Committee Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our webinar session. On behalf of Institute of Indonesia Chartered Accountants and Accountancy Monitoring Committee Indonesia, we would like to deliver our sincere gratitude to all of the panelists, moderator, honorable guests, and all of the participants who already joined this event. We also would like to thank you, our supporting partner, ASEAN Federation of Accountants. Please do not forget that you need to join our survey and answer the right keywords to obtain a certificate. It will be closed at 6 PM Jakarta time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Monica Nabilia. Please stay safe and stay healthy. Do not forget to wear your mask, wash your hand, maintain social distance, avoid gathering, and reduce mobility. I certainly hope to see you again in another event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Iskandar, Miss Sagita.
Thank you, Sagita, Pak Iskandar.
Sagita, thank you, Pak Iskandar. Thank you, Edu.
Thank you, Bu Linda.
Terima kasih, Bu Linda.
Sama-sama.
Terima kasih, Pak Ari.
Thank you, Bapak Ibu.
Thank you, Pak
Pak
Iskandar.
Ibu
Mona, terima kasih.
Izin live.
Izin live.
Maliki, terima kasih sudah hadir.
Ya, keren. Terima kasih. Bu Linda juga.
Bu Eni, terima kasih. Pak David.
Ya,
Pak
izin
Gatot,
live ya.
Pak Dadang,
Terima kasih Bapak-Bapak. Selamat malam.
Selamat sore.
Selamat sore.
Stay safe, stay healthy, Pak.
Oh, ya punya Pak.
rising 2,000 miles away. Memories of history, rising hope and dignity. Let's change for a brighter day. Unity in diversity, together as one. From Bali to Pattaya, Langkawi to Sentosa. No boundaries, no distance. Let's start to be the greatest one. ASEAN speak family. Symphonies and harmony, those flags very high, facing new world and change side by side. Friendship for a lifetime, me and you, yes we all. Blessings through our heart, in safety and peace. Holy time. Here we are. Holy time. We are together as one. Let our dreams be the beauty that we are. Let our dreams be the beauty that we are. Synergy to prosperity, the future in our hands. From Manila to Mandalay, and Goa to Seria. Pick your bag and camera. Set your plan to great journey along Vientiane to Hanoi. Symphonies and harmony, those flags very high, facing new world and change side by side. Friendship for a lifetime, me and you, yes we all. Blessings through our heart, in safety and peace. Unity in diversity, together as one.
Bapak dan Ibu hadirin sekalian, kami akan menutup ruangan Zoom webinar ini dalam hitungan ketiga. 1, 2, 3.